All right, good evening everybody. Thanks for coming to part 7 of 7. 7 days of the week, 7 notes on a musical scale, 7 colors, 7 continents, 7 seas, 7 parts. Okay, 7-part series. So we're finishing tonight, Bezrat Hashem, and then we're going to be moving on to another very interesting topic. We're probably going to have Purim in between, so we'll do a little Purim tonight and a little class purely for Purim next week, Bezrat Hashem. But tonight, we want to wrap it up. We saw, up until now, many different applications of this overarching theme. Of this world being a mirror and a manifestation of higher forces. That's really the theme of all these shiurim. And we saw how it plays itself out in many different aspects of reality, whether it's the animal kingdom, or Nevuah, or the Beis HaMikdash, or the human body. We saw many different areas. So tonight, we're going to try to focus it a little bit into practical avodas Hashem. What does all of this actually mean for us on a practical level? Because Hashem gave us this wisdom because we should be able to use it to enhance our avodas Hashem. It's not just theoretical. Usually when we'll see in the Ramchal here, but I'll just say it outside. It's the beginning of what he says here. But very, very nice. And just to point out, this year is sponsored by Eitan Barak. Thank you very much, Eitan. As a schus for Yehonatan, Dov, Mordechai, Daniel, Eliezer, Bnei Shmuel, Susan. May Hashem return them to their families speedily and grant them a Yeshua. Okay. So we were describing the fact that everything that we spoke about up until now, the Ramchal says, could not be known or deduced or discovered were it not that Hashem revealed it to us, almost prophetically, or at least with Ruach HaKodesh. Nothing we spoke about you could just know. It's impossible. It's impossible to just know those things. They had to be revealed to us by Hashem, through the Chachamim, through the Nevi'im. So all the sources, which is why I felt it was very important to have a source sheet for every shir, which many shirim I give, I do not necessarily feel the need to print out source sheets, is because you can't believe anything that I'm saying unless it's written here, because it might sound cool, but who says? That all the things I said, there's no way to actually test them. There's no way to know them. They're not empirical, they're not scientific. You can't necessarily observe them. So it has to come from a source that's much higher than us. So if that source felt the need to reveal it to us, and trust me, there are, as we mentioned in the previous year, infinite levels to Torah. So there are many things that are not revealed to us that we're only going to maybe understand or comprehend when we get to the next world. So if Hashem revealed these things to us in this world, it automatically means that they are to be used as tools in avodas Hashem. That's usually a given rule. Because like we said, we think that Hashem revealed all the Torah. He gave us the whole Torah. But we learned in all these shurim, you kidding? He gave us the tip of the iceberg. Of an iceberg that's infinite. So it's not even an iceberg. It goes on forever. It's literally a grain of sand in the Sahara Desert. That's what we see in the Torah that we were given. Right? It goes back infinite levels, and that's going to be our whole Olam Haba, is going to be Torah. So whatever he did feel the need or gave us the privilege of understanding, so obviously it's a tool to be used in the video game. That's why he gave it to us. And this is the Ramchal himself who brings this and just says that everything that we're speaking about, you can't know. It had to have been revealed. So at the very beginning of the Sil Sisharim, he says that the entire point of this world is avodas Hashem, and to earn your Olam Haba. So you put the two together, it means that anything that Hashem did reveal to us was giving us a roadmap to get there. So that's the goal. So this year, we're just going to try to plug it into a few practical examples of how to understand this. Now, very often, when people begin to learn halacha, they have a real issue with it. If you notice, most of the shiurim I give after davening things, I try to give a lot of halacha shiurim. And most people think it's a lot of minutia, it's a lot of details. Like God's this big picture being that's focusing on spirituality and he wants the heart, and that's really all that really matters. So let's all go become hippies and dance all day.
That's the cardiac Jew.
The cardiac Jew. Yeah. The cardiac Jew. So who needs all that? Does Hashem really care about all the details? Is Hashem so OCD that he cares the order in which you cut your fingernails? Like, are you serious? Does he care that when you daven, here, look at the source sheet, okay? Little star thingy number 2. Why is the Torah OCD about the specific positioning of our bodies when performing mitzvahs? And I brought you 9 different halachas. When purifying the Matzorah, the Kohen puts a mixture of oil and sacrificial blood on his right thumb and big toe. When you read through the Torah sometimes, you think this is ridiculous. When it says how they're Mashuach, the Kohen Gadol, and it's always waving pieces of the animal together with the Kohen and rubbing things on people's ears and pouring oil all over everybody. And it's always very, very specific. It's very, very strange. So if you just have a religion that you think everything is superstitious and ceremonial, so okay, you have to make up a procedure because otherwise you're not going to have a ceremony. But if you believe that it was divinely ordained and given by Hashem, so there's infinite significance and all of these random details. It's not just rub it on his big toe and his earlobe, like just because that's where else are you going to put it? There's a deep significance to that part of a person's body, which we learned about the previous year, that the human body corresponds to the divine body, so to speak, or the divine will, and that every organ in a person's body is to teach us something about that specific faculty or process. So too, if you take the blood from a sacrifice and you have to rub it on that specific finger, so that specific finger corresponds to a very specific spiritual part of the person's soul, and if you take the animal blood and rub it there, you see that there's an interplay between mitzvahs and ceremonial acts and the spiritual world. That's really what we're trying to understand here. The next one, holding the Kiddush cup in the right hand. So anyone that was in the Kiddush halachas in the WhatsApp group, we said you take it with 2 hands, then you move it to the right hand in the palm, the finger should elevate around the cup. I'm sure there's people that are saying that like, okay, just hold the cup.
Even if you're
what's the deal? Yeah. Look, and bottom line is that halachically, right, you could just hold the cup and you're yotzei, but what's this hiddur? Why would anyone care how he holds the cup? Right? The halacha is you make kiddush over wine, so you have wine in the cup. You pick up the cup, so you're making it over the wine, and make your declaration. And it's true, that's the bare bones halacha. But when the Mishnah Brura brings the Shla Kadosh, who's coming from Kabbalistic sources, it says it should be in the palm, and the finger should elevate around the cup. So, does that really make a difference? So, we'll see. Okay, next. When blowing the shofar, we hold the horn to the right side of the mouth. Some have the custom, and when you're davening during the Amidah, the right hand should be over the left. A lot of times you're davening, you notice you accidentally, right? Right hand should be over the left. It should be like a person begging before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So a hachna, you should have a posture that is being machni yourself in front of Hashem. So you stand like this, not like this. Right hand over the left. Okay? So why do you have to have your hand over the left? Okay. When holding the Sefer Torah, hold it on the right side of your body. Right? The Kohen always performs his right hand. You always have to turn to the right whenever you do any turning. When you get dressed, there's an order in which you have to dress your body, right before left, tying your shoes, tying them left before right. When you take a shower, you have to wash your head first. Your rosh is the melech, then you have to wash your right arm, then your left arm. Yeah, right? Even for showering, an order to shower, an order of washing the limbs of the body. Right? That's number 8. There it is. Wash the right arm, left arm. You're supposed to wash the head first. And number 9, our last one was for cutting the nails, cutting your toenails. It causes forgetfulness if you cut your nails in the wrong in order.
This is a tricky one. Where we're told, don't cut them in order, but the pinky first, and then the middle one, then the thumb, then go back to the ring finger, then go back to the index finger.
For the first year you do it, so you'd have to look at the Chabad website where it has like a picture of a hand and it has like little arrows, like 1, 2, 3, and like gives you like the order. But you learn the order. First of all, just to point out that unique halacha is brought by the Ramah, and guess who says it's hocus pocus? The Arizal. The Mishnah Berurah brings Arizal. Rabbi hocus pocus. I mean, Rabbi Kabbalah says hocus pocus. It's very interesting that he says hocus pocus. And Magen Avraham says that the Mishnah Berurah brings that the Arizal says it's not an Indian, you don't have to worry about it. And then the Magen Avraham says, but we should still be machmer if we can, because the Ramah brought it. And evidently, if the Arizal says, like, interesting, just point that out, fine. But there's an order in which a person should cut his fingernails. So again, sounds OCD. Sounds ridiculous.
And you heard of another reason, because cutting them in order is the way it's done for a mess.
That's why you don't cut your feet and your hands on the same day.
But also in order for the same reason.
Really? Okay. I would have thought just a natural way to cut them in order, even not for a mace, but I would have done it in order if you didn't tell me otherwise.
Yeah.
So these are a lot of halachas that we find, and then there's the first little one that we mentioned last year. People, they see them opening their hands during Pesach Sedech, Masbil Chol Chai Ratzon, especially the Sfardim. It's like Do you have to open your hands? Is there a need to open your hands? What are they doing? Is that like just silly? Like, so you read a line that says Hashem's going to open his hands, so you should open your hands. What does that do? Like, what's the idea? What's the deal? So this is very, very important. This is why this is so important, because halacha can become very deeply meaningful if you plug it into pnimius. Right? Tamei hamitzvahs, they say, right? Learning the reasoning behind the mitzvahs. So they call it tamei hamitzvahs. So we know that any reason you give for a mitzvah is not really the ultimate reason. The ultimate reason is beyond our understanding. Hashem said it, so we do it. Now, why does Hashem sometimes provide us with a reason for a mitzvah? So tamei hamitzvahs also means tam means flavor. It's to give flavor to the mitzvahs. It's very hard to invest yourself emotionally in a mitzvah if it's just do it because I told you to. It's very, very hard. So Hashem threw us a bone because he wants the heart. So he gave you tamei hamitzvahs, so he flavors the mitzvahs a little bit. And he makes them a little more enjoyable for the sake of us connecting to those mitzvahs. So this is really the concept of tamei hamitzvahs. But it's the tam for mitzvahs that don't have a tam, don't have a reasoning. Right? There's chukim and mishpatim. Mishpatim, okay, there's some logic behind them. Even with our logic, they are ultimately beyond our logic. Ultimately, even the ones that make sense, don't steal. Right? Even not stealing is beyond our logic. There's something much deeper to not stealing than just, you have to have a functional society. If you steal, there's going to be no one respecting anyone's property. It's just not going to work very well. There's something much deeper to stealing. But then there's certain mitzvahs that are chukim, that make no sense on a rational level. So those, you need this. You actually need this Torah. You need this Torah to actually give them the flavor, because you can't necessarily come up with a flavor otherwise, other than it's superstitious but Hashem told us to do it. So that's why we really need to understand the fact that everything in the physical world corresponds to something in the spiritual world. So when you do things down here that don't make sense, again, you're not necessarily going to understand them completely, but you can definitely get layers of understanding that'll make them more meaningful. Okay? So if we go to our first source, I want to skip what it says on the first page and jump straight to the second page. Okay? The first page is really just a very beautiful summary of everything we've said up until now. So to say it outside, just very quickly, is that everything that happens down here in this world, whether it's the objects that are created or the events that take place, it all begins up there. The storm clouds gather and then the rain pours down. The spiritual forces align themselves, then they slowly project themselves into the physical world. And one thing that we mentioned a little bit last time, I'm not sure if we did, but it's not just in the physical world and the happenings of the world. It's also in the time cycle of the world. Right? We exist in space and time. So everything in space really begins up there, like the base of Mikdash, we said it up there, and then it is projected down here. Okay? Now time also is an invention. It was invented by God. We're going to learn when we get to the near-death experiences, hopefully in the next series that we do, learning what happens when you leave this world and how you experience reality in the next world. We're going to learn that time is part of our imagination. Hashem created these two dimensions called space and time to create a stage on which he can host the physical world, which is not going to last forever. Get 6,000 years on the scale of eternity is like nothing, right? So this is really just a very, very small illusion, video game that we're in. And part of it is this concept called time, where you only exist in the present. The future has not yet been, the past is already, and you live in this sliver of time called the present. It's so tiny you can't even pinpoint it, because every second the present slips into the past and the future is like coming in. But like, you're only living in this tiny little, like, thin line of reality. That's called time. When you get to the next world, so it's not like that. Time doesn't move in a linear fashion. I wish does anyone have a pen? Anyone have a pen? So, I believe it's the Ramak that says it like this. I forget which, I have it in one of my svarim where I drew this line. But, okay. No, I'm drawing way too small. Okay. So, here. Imagine this is linear time. This big one. Ignore the little one. Okay, this big one's linear time. So every moment you're moving to a new event, and all that exists is that event. You move to the next one, so that event now slips into the past, it's gone, doesn't exist anymore. Your memories might exist, emotions might exist, those might come forward with you, but the event, obviously, it happened, and you move forward, and that's it. Okay. Now, imagine you get to Olam Haba, and suddenly, you move this way. You don't move this way anymore, right? As you,
Which one?
you move this way. Everything moves this
Yeah.
way. Meaning all the time that you experience doesn't disappear.
In other words, everything exists at once.
Everything exists at once, and it keeps getting amplified by there's still a sequence. We'll see in the near-death experience shiurim about people that have been to the next world. There is sequence. They experience, right, one thing after another, but the previous moment doesn't go away. It somehow comes with them. It amplifies the moment that was there before, so that if you feel pain, it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. It doesn't get more intense. The previous moment's pain or embarrassment or shame, this is for people that went to Gehenna, it comes with them every moment going forward. So it can only get worse because you're going from 10 to 11 to 12 and you're carrying the previous 10 with you every single moment. It's all, and the same thing applies to the pleasure that we'll experience in Olam Haba. We can't imagine a pleasure experience in the next world is not even in the same ballpark as a pleasure experience in this world. In this world, you taste something delicious. The taste is fading. The previous moment's experience is gone, and the next moment comes, and then eventually the taste fades away. Imagine that taste only amplifies itself, and it builds, it gets better and better and better, so the pleasure can only move up. And you'll take the moment's pleasure before it with you to the next moment. And it just gets, and it can go on for eternity. Right? You can't even imagine how pleasurable something can be. Rabbi Dessler says that if you took all of the pleasure that ever existed in human history, right? Michael Jordan hitting the game winner, I'm not talking about physical pleasure, spiritual pleasure, winning the championship, Tom Brady 7 Super Bowls, right? And you take all the physical pleasure you can ever imagine that every human being ever experienced through all of history, he says, every moment ever, you condense all of that pleasure and that ecstasy into one moment, it will not compare to one moment of Olam Haba. Pretty crazy, right? All the pleasure ever experienced in this physical world. Now, when we learn the shir, it's so obvious. It's not impressive because God created reality. Whatever pleasure you have here is so limited. It's so dumbed down. It's such an illusion that it's not going to even compare to real pleasure. We won't even call it pleasure. So you remember that thing that happened when you used to eat delicious food? Like, that was okay. You wouldn't use the word pleasure in the next world when you get to Olam Haba. You wouldn't even use the word pleasure. It was like a tingling, like the tingling that we felt when we won the championship, the NFL, like the Super Bowl. Like, it won't even be anything because you're going to be in a different reality, in a different mode of time. So in this world, just to point out that even time starts up there and trickles down here. For example, the Ramchal brings a very famous concept that pretty much every rabbi should begin all of his drushes when it comes to Yom Tovim with this concept, is that every Yom Tov is generated by the time of year in which it falls. Okay. For example, so many people think that we celebrate Pesach in the Aviv in the spring because Pesach took place in the spring. So therefore it falls out every year in Nisan on the spring, and we always have to add a month every now and then to make sure that it falls in the spring. So Pesach happened to have fallen out in the spring, so we celebrate in the spring. So it's not true. Ramchal says it's the opposite. Spring is the time of rebirth and rejuvenation. How do you know? So go outside. Go outside and look at the world. Appreciate how amazing it is, trees and plant life, when you can look at what's happening. It all dies in the winter. Everything looks dead. Like, imagine this is you were born as an adult and you lived through 1 year of seasons, not in Florida, right? New York, okay? And everything just died. You're like, oh my gosh, everything's dead. Like, you try to water it, nothing happens. Get sunshine, nothing happens. Like, everything's dead. And then suddenly, one day, you start, you notice these little buds are popping out and everything.
Tu B'Shvat, that's
Tu B'Shvat.
when it starts.
A week later, flowers, suddenly blooming, blossoming, you can't believe it, everything's back to life. So that means, what does that mean? So now, based on all these shiurim, is you can now have an indicator of what you can tap into in the spiritual time cycle. Hashem is now sending the power of rebirth and rejuvenation into the world. That's what's flowing down from up there. It's flowing into the world. Now, if you want to create a nation from scratch, the Jewish people, so when's a good time to birth them into the world? So Nisan. Nisan's a great time because that's the energy that can create and rejuvenate something that was in the dust. So you have a nation that was slaves 210 years, and you want to finally turn them into an Am, and you want to have them go through the splitting of the Yam Suf. So what do? You do it in Nisan, because that's the energy that's coming into the world during Nisan. That's what you can actually attach yourself to. So not just the physical world starts up there and finishes down here. Time also has this spiritual cycle up there, and then it flows down here. And if you look at the physical world, about the phenomena that are taking place around you, so you can get an inkling of what's happening. Also the holidays. So it's not that Pesach took place in the spring, it's that spring enabled Pesach to take place. How do you think it says in the Torah that Avraham Avinu used to eat matzahs and celebrate Pesach before it happened? Woo, crazy. Why do we eat matzahs? Why do we eat matzahs? To remember that they left really quickly and they had to make matzahs, or that Hashem commanded them to make matzahs to eat with the Korban Pesach, right? So how could Abraham have eaten matzahs before the matzah event ever happened? Before the rushing out of Mitzrayim ever happened? There was no concept of the whole matzah was because they had to rush, they didn't have time for the dough to rise. So how does that make any sense? So the idea is that Abraham knew, just based on looking at the physical world, that the koach of Pesach was upon him. He knew those 7 days because he was so spiritually in tune that he felt, he's like, it's Pesach. What am I supposed to do? Eat matzah. Okay, now, what are mitzvahs? What's matzah? What's shofar? What's shalach manos, even the rabbanans? What are all these mitzvahs, lulav and esrog? So a mitzvah, and this is a very important concept when it comes to mitzvahs that are done once a year, very, very important, is that a mitzvah is a way to build a spiritual vessel to receive that energy that's coming into the world on that specific holiday. It's the only way to... How do you build a spiritual vessel? Well, you can't use sticks, you can't use paper, you can't use plastic. Lulav stick. Okay, you go pick up a different stick, it's not going to work. Take a lemon, not going to work. Right? How do you build a spiritual vessel? So, you can't. Only Hashem can build spiritual vessels. But he can tell you what buttons to press down here, which materials that at that point of the year, at the exact right time, if you shake them in the right way and hold them together in the right configuration, it'll build this spiritual bucket. And now you're gonna get the koach of Sukkot. Now every holiday, hopefully we'll have a little shiur and we'll discuss what is the koach of each holiday, what's it gonna do for you, what do you accomplish through that holiday, what's the theme of the holiday. But when you do the mitzvah of the Yom Tov, that's the only way to get the spiritual hashpa'ah of that Yom Tov, the spiritual energy of that Yom Tov. There's no other way to do it. You can't get it any other way. I don't care how much you learn about it. You can't get it. You have to build it. And that's the only way to build it. I love, in Israel, when I'm there, you go around the shuk, there's like thousands of places selling esrogim, and you get that really nice ones, $300. I mean, in New York, you probably have ones that are like $5,000, $10,000. Crazy. 7 days later, you know how much it's worth? If you even. Lucky if you can sell them for 5 shekels. Yeah. Lucky. Worth almost nothing. So it's like probably the fastest depreciation that occurs in the world if you're an accountant and you have like a whole inventory of esrogim. And you're like, it's like I have like $5 million, like boom, like 1 day later, it's like I have $2 of esrogim. They're worth like, whoever knows how to make esrog jelly, like the 3 women in the world who can still make it, it's like that's what it's worth. With nothing. So what really happens, so it's such a beautiful example when you think about like that, the actual value in dollars and cents mimics the spiritual utility of that fruit. Is that beautiful? Like the spiritual utility of the fruit only lasts 7 days. It's literally like you're putting a price on spirituality, putting a price on a mitzvah. It's exactly what it is, because 7 days later, the mitzvah doesn't exist anymore. So guess what? This became a lemon. Went from an esrog, pre hadar, right? Everyone's going around showing their buddies, looking at it, and now it's worth almost nothing. You know why? Because you passed that little block of time called Sukkos, when if you shook this esrog with a lulav, hadassim, and arabos, you created a spiritual vessel. Now, the next day, if you shake it, it doesn't do anything. It does nothing. If a goy shakes it, it does nothing. Which is, again, we mentioned previously, this interplay between the Jewish neshama and the spiritual worlds. When you have to press the buttons, certain buttons only work if you have a Jewish neshama, right? If it's like you have an adapt, like you try to plug it in, it just like doesn't fit. So you try to plug in a non-Jewish neshama into the mitzvah of lulav and esrog, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to conduct any electricity. Nothing's going to happen. You have to have the Jewish neshama holding them in the right configuration, shaking them in the right order, in the right directions, and voila! You can change the world. You can change yourself, you can change the world, you can change your grandchildren. You don't even know what you can change. Unbelievable what you can do. You can buy yourself the world to come. 1 day later, nothing. Zero. Your esrog is puzzle, right? It's missing a chunk on the first day, nothing. You shake it, it doesn't do anything. So this is this added layer of the interplay between time and space in the spiritual world. There's a spiritual time and a spiritual place. Those overlap. That sometimes if you take a spiritual item, a lulav and esrog, it can only become spiritual when it hits that little indicator on that spiritual cycle, on that time cycle that it actually reaches. So that's another deeper understanding of mitzvahs and matzah. Matzah, the Zohar says matzah is michla de mehemnusa. It's the food of emunah. It's the food of emunah. So okay, if you want to take it not like the Zohar, so it means if you're eating it when you're talking about inyanei emunah. But the Zohar says that if you eat matzah, you ingest emunah. Right?
Only on Pesach.
Only on Pesach. Only on Pesach. If you eat matzah on Pesach, you ingest emunah. You want to like a guy, people. Someone asked me recently, he said, "Can I invite my non-religious relative to our seder if he's going to drive?" And he's going to drive in Buchal Shabbos, Buchal Yom Tov. So can I invite him? Okay. So not to give the halacha shir here, but the general principle is that there's a concept that it's mutav sheyachal Shabbos achas kadei sheyishmru Shabbos harbe. That this is the heter in the Gemara in the Havamina for Pikuach Nefesh. At the end of the time, the Gemara says we learn it from Bechai Behem V'lo Sheyamos Behem that life overrides mitzvahs, except for the big three. Life overrides mitzvahs. But in the Gemara, before it gets to that, it says it's better to break one Shabbos in order to keep many. So you can break Shabbos to save a life, so that life will then be able to keep many Shabbos. So Rav Yitzchak Berkovitz, who is the Rosh Yeshiva of Eshet Torah, said that even though it's a Havamina, the logic stands. The Gemara just found the pasuk that was better to learn it from, Chai B'hem. But it still stands. And that means that any time that it's not you're allowed to break, but you're causing someone to be over an Aveira, which is lo titin michshol. You're telling him to drive to your house for Shabbos. So if this driving is going to cause him to keep Shabbos in the long run, then it's mutter. If not, it's asr. So obviously you're going to ask the question, like, I don't know if it's going to work. So he says, you have to really, only you can know, and you have to really honestly believe that there's a good chance that this will work. Now usually that's true, because if a person doesn't experience a religious Shabbos, there's almost no chance he'll ever, become religious or find God. So usually it's pretty easy. But let's say he comes to you like for 5 years in a row and doesn't change an iota. And you know he's coming to you just because he likes the food. He loves challah. That's it. This is challah once a week, and he has no intention of changing whatsoever. So you really don't have a heter to invite that person anymore. Unless you're going to change something up in your meal, and now you say, well, now I say a different divrei Torah, and I speak with him for 10 minutes after about a spiritual concept.
But you can't know that. You never know.
Yeah, so you don't have heter. Yeah.
You never know.
You have to hold it. You have to hold it. You have to know that there's a good chance. So you don't know until you've tried 20, 30 times. You're right. Who knows if this time it's going to work? But that's not enough.
Even 100 times. You don't know.
So that's not enough.
You don't know how it's affecting you.
So that's not enough. That's not enough to cause him to drive to your house on Shabbos. You can't. Lo titin michshol. There's an aveira in front of you. Right? You can't.
Or we just say that, it can or it can't happen.
You know, it's in Hashem's power.
Yeah.
So if you keep putting out the milk, the cat will come.
Yeah, you hope, but you don't know. Not everyone's going to come. You got to. That's what to do this halacha. He tells you have to hold. It's a good chance. Now, again,
if you truly believe if you truly believe that potentially it could bring him to.
yeah, but let's say your Shabbos table is all football and politics, okay? And you're like, I'm inviting him for Shabbos. So okay, so why would you assume that he's going to become frum because he comes to your football and politics Shabbos table? Because you make kiddush for 3 seconds? Because he's going to like hanging out with, okay. I know it's going to maybe help that he'll be around Jews more often. That's not enough. Say that's not enough. It's a good chance of making him keep, it's mutav shechal Shabbos achas kidei sheyishmeru Shabbos harbe. It's mutar to break one Shabbos in order to keep more Shabbos. So, okay. So, but, we just said that if you eat matzah with the intention of fulfilling a mitzvah, and let's say you even make the bracha, on Pesach, you're ingesting emunah. That's what's happening. So if that's what you're going to do with this guy at your Pesach Seder, then you have a very, very good shot of changing him, right? If he's going to do a mitzvah like that, a once a year mitzvah deraisa, right? Matzah, Pesach night, at the Seder, that's got a good shot. I mean, even if you have a lame Seder, right? He's eating emunah. He's eating emunah if you get him to do the mitzvah properly. In the beginning of my Seder, and maybe when we get to Pesach, we'll do a little learning about the Haggadah and running Seder. But every mitzvah we get up to, I explain all the halachas, but I give it with the Haggadah that I gave before. I said we're building a spiritual vessel. We're about to receive an unbelievable light and gift from Hashem. We have to make sure that we do everything perfectly, or it's going to have cracks. Do you want your spiritual vessel to have cracks and it's going to be leaking out all year? No, you got to do it perfectly. You got to make sure you lean to your left. If you get to lean, you got to do it again. You got to eat the right shear of matzah. Right? You measure it out before. You don't have to eat too much. You go crazy, but right, you have to eat the right shear of matzah. All these things, they're not OCD. You're building spiritual vessels. So how do you know how to build a spiritual vessel? You have no idea. The Shulchan Aruch tells you how you build a spiritual vessel. That's the only way you're going to know. So if you don't follow the rules, like imagine you get this like crazy, complicated IKEA piece of furniture. I had this once. I had a drunken handyman. His name was Frank. He was always drunk on the job. It's terrible. He had hands of gold. This man could build anything and do great work, but he had a drinking problem, so it was terrible to deal with. But I asked him like to build this IKEA furniture for me, like a bunch of stuff, and he just like ignores the instructions. I come like a few hours later, it's like certain pieces you have to put in, they're like left in the bag. He's like, man, they give you all these extra pieces. It's so ridiculous. They don't know what to do. He's like, I'll figure it out. I'll make it work. And I'm like, gosh, Frank, I was so mad I had to take it apart and I had to put the pieces back in because he thought he knew better than IKEA. I'm like, they don't make mistakes on these instructions. Like, you don't know better than the pieces that they put in the bag. You're not missing any pieces. Like, it's very rare that IKEA will be missing a piece. So he thinks he knows better about how to build the vessel. So someone does a mitzvah. I don't have to eat the sheer matzah. You're all crazy. Oh, bite the matzah, whatever. It's matzah's matzah, you know. Is it matzah if I eat this much? Is matzah if I eat that much? Like, that's so silly. If you're going to eat matzah, so you're working under the premise that there's something called a mitzvah of eating matzah. If you're going to be working under that premise, then who the heck said there's a mitzvah to eat matzah? Who says eating a cracker tonight does anything? So if you actually have any inkling of belief that it does something, so then follow all the halachas. That's the only logical conclusion you can make, is you better take it all the way. You're going to do a little bit, so the logic is that, okay, this is all invented by God, so therefore, if the Shulchan Aruch tells me that there's a myriad of details that apply, I should take all of them just as seriously as I take the ingestion of matzah itself. I should take all these details as seriously. It's not just chumras. It's not like Hashem is just, the rabbis decided to add extra stuff. No, they're the ones learning the Torah. The Torah is the blueprint. The Torah tells you how to build the vessel. There's a lot of details. You don't want to build one that's leaky. You don't want to build one that's cracked. There's a big hole in the bottom. You want to make sure it works. If you're going to do it, make sure it works. So you have to learn halachas. Halachas is very, very important, because if you're going to do mitzvahs, which is the whole point of being in this world, is doing mitzvahs, and of course you have to have the heart in it. You have to understand, and this is the way to get the heart into it. If you understand that the way you hold the cup is causing different angels to be born in the higher worlds, and when you get up there after 120, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, that was the kiddush I made Friday night, June 20th. Like, whoa, it's like unbelievable. So you're going to realize that, whoa, this has tremendous significance. You're going to have, again, now don't take it into OCD where like now, like you can't move without. But slowly, you build in halacha. And like we said, Talmidei Chachamim have like Terminator vision, where like everything is like like they're measuring things with halacha, and everything they look on Shabbos like borer and Dal Tarses, and it's cool when you learn halacha, you start thinking like that. But that's the way it should be, but not in an OCD way. But this is the Ratzon Hashem. This is how I build my spiritual vessel. My Rebbe's Rebbe once visited Mevaseret, and he's like, imagine you're sleeping in bed, and you wake up, and you like just forgot it was Shabbos, and you like flip on the light. So what would you say after? It was B'shogeg, I forgot it was Shabbos. Flipped on the light. She said, what would you think if you woke up and like you weren't paying attention and you're the President of the United States and you opened that special red box and you press the button and it shot off like 10 nuclear missiles and like killed 1 billion people. That was a show gig. I wasn't paying attention. I thought it was my cell phone. You're like, whoa. He says, when you flip that light, the damage it did up there was worse than 10 nuclear missiles. When a Jewish neshama broke Shabbos, even b'shogeg, and that's what was crazy about even b'shogeg. So you have to bring a chatas, right? You have to bring a korban chatas. It wasn't like you didn't do anything. There's something called misasek, which is different. But assuming you just forgot it was Shabbos and you did a malacha, you had to bring a korban chatas. You know what that meant? That meant like if you lived in the north, you had to take off like a month from work and like travel and bring a korban. It was like a big deal. It's a big deal because something very serious happened. Up there. Down here, yeah, you just turned a light on. No big deal. Up there, you destroyed worlds. You killed 1 million angels. I don't know. We don't know exactly what happened, but we know it was very, very serious. There's infinite amount of angels, so killing 1 million angels isn't so hard. It's a lot of them. So this is the seriousness with which we have to take our actions in this world. Is that if you only saw that what the amount of wires and the amount and the machines and everything that's moving up there, that's all dependent on us. And a Jewish neshama is the only one that can press the buttons. A goy can smash the keyboard all day; it doesn't do anything. Because his neshama is just not plugged in the same way.
It's like a car with all the systems and all the engine transmission and everything. There's so much detail and so much precision. If you deviate from precision from any small part, you could really.
And only if you have the right fingerprints
is
it going to work, right? It's got a fingerprint ID that only works for Jewish fingerprints. That's how this world operates. So just to look at one source inside over here where it's bold. We'll do the bold piece. Okay. Oh, this is very, very important. So he says, actually before the bold, he says, V'hine, lefi shor zeh, from the top of the page. Tchilas kol havayis lamala bekochas alyonim v'sofa lamata b'shvalim. V'chein tchilas kol anyanim hamischadshim lamala v'sofa lamata. He said everything starts up there and ends down here. Amnam, prat echad yesh yotze min haklal hazeh. One thing does not follow this rule, that everything begins up there and ends down here. One thing does not follow that system. Okay, hu ma shenogeh lebechiraso shel ha'adam. That is your bechira. Your free choice does not begin up there. Since Hashem wanted the person to have the ability to choose that which he desired, whether good or evil, he now so bilti tolui ba bezulaso. So therefore he made man the only element in creation that is not dependent on what's happening in the higher worlds. Every animal, every blade of grass begins up there, something happens up there, and the mazel, or the angel that's in charge of it, and it sends the command down here. Not a human being. He gave us the power to move the world up there. Or even his creatures down here with whatever we choose. So therefore you see in the world there's two conflicting and opposite movements. One is the natural, necessary order of things, nature, the rules of nature, the laws of nature. And the second one is our free choice, that we can actually affect the world. One begins up there and ends down here, and the sheni milamata lamala, one begins down here and ends up there. We can move things up there. So the thing that you don't have control of is whatever starts up there and affects you down here. Okay. It's how you can shake the rope down here. But you can't move things up there. You can't just go straight to the Shemaim and move things in the spiritual worlds. You can only move the physical world because you're stuck in a physical body. Ki Adam Gashmi, Umasav Gashmi, you're physical and you're in a physical world. Aval mipnei hakesher v'haitztarfut hanimtza ben hakochas alyon v'gashmi. But since everything down here is connected with a wire up there, hine betnua hagashmi yagia behemshech hitpalut el hakoch elyon. By shaking the rope down here, you move things up there. Therefore, it's the opposite of the natural order where things start up there and end down here. Now watch this. We'll end with this tonight. Okay? A very, very amazing idea on Purim from the Bnei Yissaschar. So there's two Yomim Tovim that are Derabanan. What are the two Yomim Tovim Derabanan? Purim and Chanukah. Okay. There's many Sfarim that are devoted to comparing and contrasting Purim and Chanukah. If these were the only holidays that the Derabanan established, so first they're very, very significant. Right? There was many events, miraculous salvations that the Jewish people experienced throughout their history. If these were the ones that were, determined that they would become holidays with Hashem's stamp of ratification, so they're very special. They're very special because we created them with divine inspiration. Obviously, Hashem orchestrated which ones would become Chanukah and which one would become Purim, but they're very, very special Yomim Tovim. Some say they're deeper than actual Yomim Tovim. We could do malacha on them. So some people say, oh, you see, it's not so holy, you can do malacha on it. No, it's so holy that you can even do malacha on it. It can sanctify everything. It shows how special the holiday is. So you'll notice that they're both very different. The Beis Halevi says, he asks a good question. He says, when it came to our physical annihilation, which is Purim, so what was the Jewish response? So it was to fast and daven for 3 days. Right? That's how we overcame the decree. We overcame the decree, okay, fine. Then we eventually fought, but that's how we overcame the decree. When it came to Hanukkah, which there was no physical annihilation, there was no order to kill Jews. The order was, you can't be religious. You have to assimilate. The attempt was assimilation. So what did we do? It doesn't say anywhere that at Hanukkah they fasted and davened. They picked up swords and they fought. They fought battles. Even the tzaddikim, right? They were all kohanim in the base of Mikdash. They all picked up swords and just fought against crazy odds. If you read the Midrashim, it was like 1,000 to 1. They defeat the greatest empire in the world. So he asks the obvious question. When you're facing a physical annihilation, so then the weapon you choose, the weapon of choice seems to be the spiritual weapon, davening and fasting. When you face spiritual annihilation, the weapon of choice is the sword. It's the physical battle. So why the opposite? So he says, it's a klal. You see in the Gemara in Berachos. It says, Hakol bidei Shemayim chutz mi Yireh Shamayim. Everything is in the hands of Hashem except for Yireh Shamayim. That means everything, meaning everything that has to do with the physical world. Your children, having children, your parnasa, your health, where you live, who you're married, right? All those things are in the hands of Hashem. If you want to affect them, so you just got to daven. That's one way you can really affect them. You daven. You have to obviously do your part. It's called the shtadlus. You have to actually, go through the motions. But Hashem is going to be the deciding factor there. When it comes to Yireh Shamayim, see, Hakol bidei Shemayim, chutz mi Yireh Shamayim. If you're in the world of Yireh Shamayim, which is all the ethical, moral, and religious decisions that you make in life, that's completely up to you. That is completely in your hands. You can daven all day, and you can get siyata d'shmaya. You still should daven. I'm sure the Maccabees were davening. But at the end of the day, the onus was on them. The responsibility was on them. They had to pick up swords and they had to fight. So when they were facing physical annihilation, so which side of the equation were they on? Hakol bidei Shemayim. Am I going to survive or get killed? Right? My physical life is at stake. So how do I affect that side of the equation? Right? I daven to Hashem, because Hakol bidei Shemayim, it's all up to Hashem. When you're facing someone who's trying to wipe out your religion and telling you you're not allowed to learn Torah and keep Shabbos, so then which side of the equation are you on? You're on the chutz mi Yireh Shamayim. Now everything's in the hands of heaven except for fear of heaven. Now you're in the world of fear of heaven, ethical, moral, and religious decisions. So then you pick up a sword and you fight. Right? You pick up a sword and you fight because it's all on you. Now it's on you. Serious nefesh. Yeah. You have to get up and you have to do. It's on you. The responsibility is on you. Okay. Now, what is the toy of Hanukkah and what is the toy of Purim? Dreidel, Hanukkah, and Purim? The Grager. Now, Bnei Yissaschar says, if you'll notice, these toys are exact opposites. They're both spinning. But one, you're spinning from the top. And one, you're spinning from the bottom. Right? So what does he say? So he says, when it came to Purim, and you're facing physical annihilation, so you have to shake the heavens. Right? You have to daven to, like we said here, all the wires are connected. So you have to daven to Hashem. He's got to move things up there and send them back down. So you got to grab your grogger. You're on the right. You're on the bottom, and you got to shake. And you got to shake. It's on you to change what's happening up there. Okay. When it comes to Hanukkah, so Hashem is the one that has to give you the koch that you. If the odds are 1,000 to 1, right? How did the Maccabees win in their battle? So it was all HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why it's a miracle, right? We celebrate the fact that it was completely miraculous. It wasn't a hidden miracle, it was an open miracle. Hashem made the oil last. They didn't have enough oil. Hashem makes it 8 days. Hashem gives it to you. He's the one that gives it to you. It's from the top down. It's these things that it's from the top down. Of course, we said you have to go through the motions, right? You have to pick up the sword. Otherwise, the battle's not going to fight itself. But it's all Hashem. That was total open miracles. Hanukkah was all hidden miracles. It was all our tefillas that generated the miraculous salvation. So we're from the bottom up, and Hanukkah is from the top down. It was all HaKadosh Baruch Hu that was giving us these open miracles. Everything was supernatural, that He's feeding it down to here. So this is just the last concept that Ramchal is saying, is that there's two different directions that are happening in the world. One is top to bottom, and one is bottom to top. If you're in the equation of davening and learning and these spiritual aspects of your life, so you're in complete control. You gotta shake. Right? That's all you down here. That's all up to you. When it comes to your physical survival, right? Physical survival. So then Hashem's the one that's going to be moving things from above, and you're going to have to be the one that you have to go through the motions, of course. But then Hashem's going to have to give you the miracles. So you have to always understand which side of the equation are you on. But this is the end of our series, and the idea that we should take away is that when you do a mitzvah, and you take like a lulav, an esrog, a dasman rose, it's not just a bunch of leaves and a lemon. Up there, you can't imagine what's coming together in your hands. When you shake it, you can't imagine what's taking place. And when you hold the yayin for kiddush and you actually go through lachas of what's the ideal thing to make kiddush on, and it all makes a very big difference about what happens up there. You go b'diavad, it's like, you go lechatchila, right? Does a lot more. It could change your life, change everything. So this is only logical when you understand that mitzvahs are illogical. The mitzvahs are all spiritual. It's all spiritual. And all you do down here is you press the buttons. So it happens to be that the details matter because that's the only way you can move things up there. Okay, shkaya.